right, now in this section, we're going to talk about the muscles of respiration. These are the muscles that enable your thoracic cavity to expand and contract to move air in and out of your lungs. All right, but let's talk about how we breathe. So first of all, air moves down pressure gradients from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure. When you increase the volume of a space, you decrease the pressure within that space. Air is then going to move into that space because now the pressure inside is lower than the pressure outside. And that applies to the thoracic cavity as well. So when we increase the size of the thoracic cavity, we decrease the pressure inside the cavity. Air flows in from an area of higher pressure outside the body to the inside, which is now at lower pressure until the pressures equalize. Then when you decrease the size of the thoracic cavity, you're now increasing the pressure in the thoracic cavity, and now the outside air is at lower pressure. So the air flows out until the air pressure inside and outside the lungs are equalized. Okay, so all the muscles we're going to talk about are going to do that. They're going to pull the ribs out, pull the ribs back in, or the diaphragm is going to pull down to increase the size of the thoracic cavity. So that's what all of these muscles are going to do. Expand and contract the size of the thoracic cavity to change the pressure inside the lungs to move air in and out of the lungs. All right, so the first and most important is the diaphragm. And you already know the diaphragm, it's the muscle that separates the abdominal cavity from the thoracic cavity. When it's relaxed, it's an umbrella shape, kind of like this, okay? It is a very nice muscle on a cow. It's a very nice muscle to eat. We call it a skirt steak because it's sort of shaped like a skirt. Traditionally, this is the muscle that is used to make carne asada, which needs to be cooked, needs to be marinated for a long time and then cooked for a long time, because this is a really tough muscle because it gets used literally all day, every day for the cow's whole life. So that's the diaphragm of the cow. Really tasty in tacos, honestly. In you, the diaphragm, well, in all animals, all land vertebrates, the diaphragm contracts. When it contracts, it pulls down. It is attached to the pleura of the lungs. So when it pulls down, it pulls the lungs and literally makes the lungs bigger, which pulls air into the lungs. When it relaxes, it goes back to that umbrella shape. That decreases the volume of the thoracic cavity and moves air out of the lungs. When we look at the diaphragm from the bottom, we see that there's an aponeurosis at the middle, and we notice that there are some holes in it. So there's one for the aorta, one for the esophagus, and one for the inferior vena cava. And we see that it's attached to the ribs all the way around and to the sternum at the front. Okay. Ooh, there's our quadratus lumborum muscle. Look at that. All right, now the intercostal muscles, their name means between the ribs. And the one thing I don't like about this diagram from your textbook is that it makes it look like the intercostals are a band of muscle behind the ribs. They're not. They're literally between the ribs. So there's a set of intercostals that goes from rib 1 to 2. There's another set that goes from rib 2 to 3. There's another set that goes from rib 3 to 4. Okay, so it's not a whole wide band of muscle. It's groups of muscles that connect the two adjacent ribs. We have two sets of intercostals, external and internal. The fibers go at right angles to each other, which helps them do their jobs. The external intercostals are going to pull the ribs out. Okay, so they're pulling the lower rib toward the upper rib. The internal intercostals are going to pull the lower rib toward the sternum, pulling them in. Okay? Now, the way you can distinguish the external and internal as well, the external intercostals go all the way to the vertebral column and then end at or kind of lateral to the costal cartilage. The internal intercostals start farther forward but extend all the way to the sternum. Okay, so when we see both of them together, we see the fibers go at right angles, and the external intercostals don't extend as far as the internal intercostals. All right, now on the back of the body, we have another set of muscles that are going to insert on the ribs to pull the ribs out and down. The serratus posterior superior and the serratus posterior inferior. Serratus, that should be that. Sorry. The serratus comes from the same root as serrated, meaning jagged. So the edges of these, because of the way they insert on the ribs, they look like a serrated knife. So that's where this name comes from. The serratus posterior superior sits deep to the trapezius, deep to the rhomboid muscles, which we haven't met yet, but those are, the rhomboids are going to connect the vertebral column to the scapula. The serratus posterior superior is deep to those. And it's going to pull these top ribs up. The serratus posterior inferior is going to pull these bottom ribs down. Okay, so this is going to help with inhalation. This is going to help with exhalation. Finally, the transversus thoracis. This is to the intercostal muscles, and it's on the deep side of the rib cage. Okay, and what they're going to do is they're going to pull the ribs toward the sternum, toward the back of the sternum. So these are going to help with exhalation. They're going to pull the costal cartilage and the ribs in toward the thoracic cavity, toward the back of the sternum. Okay, and they sit deep, obviously, to the intercostals, which are actually between the ribs. And then the scalene muscles, which we already met, of course, they do have a role in flexing the neck, but their most important role is in elevating ribs 1 and 2 to help with inhalation. All right, so on our model again, here is the serratus. No, it's not. You know what? I keep doing this wrong. Hang on. Let me go back to here. All right. This is the serratus posterior superior. Okay. It sits deep to the rhomboids. These are the rhomboids. Okay. So on this model, we actually can't see the serratus posterior superior because it's covered up by these muscles, which are the rhomboid major and minor. All right. This is the superficial muscles, the trapezius and the latissimus dorsi, which cover up all of this. Okay, so can't see the serratus posterior superior. Don't look for it. This is the erector spinae. You knew that already. This is the serratus posterior inferior, okay, connecting to the ribs. This is the diaphragm, okay. And when you are looking at muscles and you're looking at the model or looking at a diagram trying to figure out which muscle is which, look at the direction that the fibers travel. The diaphragm fibers go up and down, okay? This one that goes across, that's the transversus abdominis, okay? It's a transverse muscle. All right, now this is the front of the abdomen of this model, okay? So see how this front has been taken away? That's this, the abdomen and the thoracic, the chest cavity, or front, that's what I mean. So we have the intercostal muscles here. These are the external intercostals there. These are the internal intercostal muscles here. And then, don't worry about these are abdominal muscles. We haven't gotten to those yet. And then when we turn it around and we look at the back side, here we're looking at, here are the ribs. These are the internal intercostals. Or sorry, no, these are external intercostals here. Internal intercostals. Do I have that backwards? No, these are all internal intercostals. Yeah, I'm going crazy. These are internal intercostals. More importantly, what I was trying to get to, this is the transversus thoracis. Okay, that's that. Pulling on these these ribs toward the sternum. Okay, and then these layers here that go vertically, these are fibers of the diaphragm that interweave with this muscle, the transversus abdominis. Okay, hopefully that all makes sense. Come back to the abdominal muscles in the next section.